Fantastic. All right. Oh, I have to figure just one more second here, everyone. We're going to get started in just one more second.
Abram is in the hospital.
Yeah, I heard. I heard you're taking good care of his baby.
Yeah.
Very proud of you, Beryl. Yeah, he should have a complete and speedy recovery.
Amen.
Okay. All right, everyone. So good evening.
Hi.
Welcome to another evening. I will somehow at some point send out the what our future schedule is going to be in the upcoming beginning next week. I'm going to be reducing a little bit, but we will continue this. Hello, Liebermans. So good to see you. So this week's let me mute. Yeah, let me mute everyone. I'm sorry. 1 second. Bingo. Okay. Great. So this week we're going to read from the Torah, and we already did. Unfortunately, we did not read from the Torah itself, but we read the Torah reading from the back of our siddur, the weekly Torah portion of Naso. And there's a well-known Hasidic commentary on the very words, beginning of the Torah portion, where it says, Naso esrosh b'nei Yisrael. Raise up the heads of the Jewish people. That's what it's. That's the literal meaning of what it says. Our Hasidic masters always teach us an underlying meaning, a deeper dimension to the words. And what they explained is a very simple concept, and that is Naso es rosh. That we should raise up our heads. We should raise up our heads. What does that mean? It can mean a number of things, but generally it means that we should raise up our mindfulness as opposed to heartfulness. And I'll explain what I mean by that, although the heart's very important, the emotions are very important, but to raise up our heads, the level that we think, our level of thinking needs to be raised. And when we raise up the way we think, the way we understand, the perspective that we have, it changes our life experience. That's what happens, because then what we feel is very different. What we feel is very different. Why is that? Because there is a natural reality, which the Tanya repeats a number of times, and that is that the mind rules over the heart. It's only that when someone doesn't use their mind, which is quite common, even though but when I say using our mind, I mean really thinking. I don't mean just observing while you're chewing some seeds or some tobacco, but I mean someone who's thoughtful and thinks about an idea, a situation, and to understand it, then the person's mind actually determines their emotions. And as we all know, and I speak about this quite often, that the answer to most, if not all of our problems, but almost all of our issues, our personal issues, is actually doing this. We actually would decrease our level of aggravation, frustration, upsetness, disappointment, everything, if we would process things, which is not an easy thing to do at all, before we let our emotions take over. And the Talmud actually tells us that in the era before Mashiach, and this will give even more evidence to the fact that the things that the Talmud lists, the Talmud was written 1,500 years ago, but it was writing down teachings that preceded it by hundreds of years. So you're talking about the wisdom, which really goes back to Mount Sinai, most of it, where the Talmud says that before Mashiach comes, we're going to live in a world where black is going to be perceived as white, white is going to be perceived as black. So when we see, that things seem to be backwards or completely misunderstood, it's not that surprising. That's maybe the age that we live in. However, we must not be a part of that. That is a problem. If we are a problem, someone's got to have clarity over here. So there are two overwhelming traps that I've observed in our which these traps are traps that trap us from being able to raise our heads up and have a clear-headed perspective as opposed to getting caught up in the emotions. And one of them is following the majority. I have a conversation. I have a very good friend. He's possibly the only friend that has who passionately has very opposing views to me in many different areas of life, and he's very passionate about it. And in this area, in these areas, people usually don't see my passion because I don't really dialogue openly about them. But with him, he's the only friend I do, and we remain friends. And every once in a while, he checks in to make sure he's scared he's going to lose my friendship. With the things he says, he can be extremely, extremely hostile in his language, not to me personally, but with his views. But I take it, in context, and I always tell him, look, if anything you would have said would have ruined our friendship, boy, we would have ended a long time ago. So we have these conversations, and he always tells me, this person and this person and this person says it. Right? Or every Israeli says it, like all of these Israelis say. I spoke to a whole bunch of Israelis, they all say it. And I always tell them, so what? Is that the barometer of whether, of why something is correct or not correct? So, however, the fear, and I know this because I feel it. I feel it myself, right? I hope that fear is diminishing as I am becoming a little bit more mature, I would hope. But the fear of going against the majority. And when I say the majority, I mean the majority of our personal society. Okay? So for example, what's my personal society? My personal society can be our community. My personal society can be the Chabad world, other Chabad rabbis, right? These are all societies of people. And where the majority of people are saying something, but you're thinking, you're questioning, something doesn't jive, and sometimes we just go with it. Why do we go with it? It's the most convenient, it's the easiest, and we feel that we are not going to be, my identity, myself won't be threatened, I won't be rejected. There was a great rabbi that lived, he was during the 18th century. He was not a Hasidic rabbi, but he was a Kabbalist. Well, he passed away as the Hasidic movement was just beginning to blossom. But his name was Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz. He's a well-known rabbi during his day and until today. He's often quoted. He was one of these brilliant rabbis, someone who's gifted with just an exceptional mind. And Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz was once asked, I think it was by the Kaiser of Germany. He liked the Kaiser, I think that's how he was referred to at that time. He enjoyed the brilliant wit of Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz. So once both the king and Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz were taking a walk through the market, and the king asked Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz a very good question. He said, in your own Bible, in your own Torah, it says, Acharei Rabbim Lahates, which means that you follow the majority. If there's a debate in the Talmud amongst rabbis, so why do we generally rule with Beis Hillel and not with Beis Shammai? Because Beis Hillel had a majority. That's actually the reason why. Right? So it says to follow the majority. The majority of the world are Christian. You're a minority. What are you doing being a Jew? Good question. So Rabbi Yonason Eibeshitz says, it's a good question. He says, come, I'm going to explain it to you. They walk into the center of the marketplace, and he turns to the king and he says, look up there, you see? Now there's the king, and we'll say the chief rabbi, right? So there's, you can't get much more dignified than that, right? Two people in the middle of a marketplace, right? Very dignified, the most dignified gentlemen of the society, and they're standing in the center of the marketplace, and the rabbi turns to the Kaiser and he says, you see up there? Do you see a little bit to the left of that cloud over there? Do you see something that looks like an angel flying? You see it? And the Kaiser is just listening. a crowd starts to form around them. And what suddenly happens? Suddenly one guy says, oh, I see something. Yeah. Another guy. In a matter of a few minutes, there was an entire crowd of people who saw an angel flying next to a cloud, which Rabbi Snaibish himself didn't see. Right? What? So then the crowd dispersed, and Rabbi Snaibish said to the Kaiser, so should we follow the majority? What do you think? Should we follow the majority? So his point was, and it was well taken by the Kaiser, that when you're in the context of truth, you follow the majority. If you have absurdity going on, you don't follow the majority. So now that's a tricky thing to say to a king about Christianity. He just said that, we have Judaism. Within the context of Judaism, we follow this rule, but we don't follow this rule outside of the context of Judaism. The point, though, is it actually takes an enormous amount of courage to go against the majority. And there's something fascinating that I continuously find. And I'm going to say also, in all societal circles, and I'll begin, the one who demonstrated this to me more than anyone else probably was the Rebbe. Because the Rebbe was, I want to say this without using common day language, but the Rebbe was out of the box of Hasidic Rebbes. The Rebbe was out of the box of Hasidic Rebbes. He didn't fit in many ways the prototype of the way a Hasidic Rebbe would classically operate. I mean, almost entirely, that's the way he operated, completely differently. And he also had many, many views and teachings which were almost revolutionary, you can say, simply because they weren't really revolutionary. They're really right out of the Torah. Everything the Rebbe said was right out of the Torah. He demonstrated that. But they seemed revolutionary because there were hardly any, and very often no other rabbis who were actually pushing this effort or this mission or this belief or whatever it may be. And that requires an enormous amount of inner strength. And the Rebbe was not following the majority in his society, if you will. The Rebbe was simply following what he knew to be the truth, what he knew God wanted. So often we follow the masses, and we have to really, this is what I do for myself, is I always ask myself, why am I thinking this way? Am I thinking this way because so many other people are thinking this way? And I always try and double check. And like I mentioned last night by our meeting with the shul, I watched a video by a doctor, a medical doctor, who seems to be, because he's well-spoken, and what do I know? I don't know much about medicine. And, he was making certain points about the virus. And I passed this video by and this doctor is more of a, out of he's not your common doctor in his thought process. And I shared it with my good friend, who is more of the mainstream, and asked him what he thought about it, where he thought this person was wrong, why did he think this person was wrong, et cetera, et cetera. Because I want to understand the balance. And that's very, very important to always question ourselves, because we can fall into the trap of being a part of the majority. There's another very, very important thing that I have found, and I'm going to demonstrate this with an example, which probably some of you are going to dislike. But that's but that's par for the course. That's all fair game. So that's fine, by the way, is what I'm saying. You don't have to agree with me, and you don't have to like what I'm going to say, the example I'm going to use. But another thing is, very often we side with a position because it will make us look good. It will make us be accepted, and it will make us look, what I would say is it gives us a sense of self-righteousness when we take certain positions. And there's a fascinating thing amongst Chabad Hasidim. There was an idea that there's a Hebrew word called a blita. A blita means to be bolate, means to stick out. Like sometimes in a wall, you have bricks that are laid out in a certain way that they stick out. Right? When something sticks out, what is it doing? It's calling for attention. When something blends in, it's doing the opposite. It's getting lost in something. It's not calling out for attention. It's not expressing itself. It's just becoming a part. It's getting lost in something greater, right? By Chabad Hasidim, there was this idea, which I believe is a very important idea, of not doing anything that is boilet. Don't do anything that sticks out. Never do something which is going to make you stick out. So, excuse me for just 1 second. I'm very sorry. It should go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just click on. Oh, but I'm on it now. So I'll be with you for a second. Okay. I'm gonna hurry up. Okay. Okay. I just found out that I have about 10 minutes because Rosie has something going on, a challah bake going on. So the idea that never to do something so that, oh, you see me, to command attention. Nothing we do should be about ourselves. In English, we call it arrogance. So we never do things to stick out. We try not to, that we aspire to. We aspire not to do things to stick out. And that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Why am I taking this position? Because this is going to keep me with the trend? Because this is what everyone else is doing? Because this is socially acceptable? Or am I doing it because this makes me self-righteous? So there's, there are signs that, and by the way, I want to be clear. I know some of you may actually have these signs on your front lawn. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just sharing a perspective, and I hope that we can do that. We can share perspectives. I have no problem with anyone who has these signs on their front lawn. However, I just want you to know how I perceive them, and I know that I'm in a very small minority. Some of you are going to say, Rabbi, I don't know what you're saying, but this is just the way I read it. What are you talking about, Beryl? I'll tell you that. So people put up these signs that say, hate has no home here. And they have it in like 5 different languages, right? Number one, I pray that none of my kids should ever see me have to put up a sign to announce to the world that hate has no home here. If my entire being doesn't express that, that's a problem. And I'm not going to say I'm perfect at it because I don't think any of us are. There are things and maybe some people that we hate, but I sure hope that that's very, very small. For me to go put a sign out and it is, number one, strange to me to have to announce to the world hate has no home here. Number two, and this is my observation, okay, my observation. Number two, my perception of those signs is that those signs of hate has no home here are hateful signs. I believe that those signs are driven by people's hate to certain people who they believe are hateful. So they put up signs on their front lawn saying that hate has no home here. The very signs that say hate has no home here, I believe very often are not. Now I'm going to differentiate between 2 types of people. The one type of people are the people who passionately put those signs up, and others who think it's a nice thing, so they put it up. And I think those 2 people are very different people. But the people who passionately put them up, the fascinating thing is, in my perception, which is only a perception, okay, is that the very thing the sign says, the putting up of the sign violates. That is how black and white is confused in our day and age. Is it socially acceptable to put it up? Yes. Is it self-righteous to put it up? Yes. Does it make you look good to put it up? Yes. If someone were to ask me, why won't you put that up? And I would give them whatever reason, whether I would tell them this or I would just tell them I'm not interested, that would socially not make me look good. And I still believe that is not that the intentions of that sign are actually not what they express. And I feel more and more, I have to say, the importance of having this conversation, which is why I'm having it, that we have to be able to keep our heads clear from our biases and agendas, which confuse our minds. That's what happens. But when we start with the head, then our head tells our emotions what to feel, as opposed to our emotions guiding our head to think in some distorted way. So how do we do this, though? Because, Well, here's the thing. So number one is, if all we do is read the news, then you're hearing viewpoints and perspectives which are heavily, heavily biased and distorted. If that is our source of thinking, okay, I'm not talking about even viewpoints of thinking, we are not going to think clearly. It's not possible. That's the reason why study of Torah is extremely valuable. It's an intellectual exercise in a field of knowledge which has clarity, is true, is divine. This is the reason why studying Torah every single day is vitally important for us. And then there's something else which is also equally important, because as much as we study Torah, we cannot always, very often, I'll say for myself, we can't even take what we're learning and understand how that applies to my day-to-day living. So we all have to find for ourselves mentors or teachers, people who we feel have clarity, do not live in fear of sharing their viewpoint or thinking independently, not being self-righteous people, and being intellectually honest. And I don't know if it's that easy to find such people, but today, thank God, because of the internet, there are so many Torah teachers who also apply many teachings that we can find who resonate with us, because different teachers have different styles. So we have to find someone that we say, wow, I like this guy. I like the way he approaches things, but it needs to come from a Torah perspective. And when we can see that a person has enough intellectual honesty that when he's shown to be wrong, he can acknowledge that. Or when he doesn't know, he says, I don't know. These are all signs of someone who has some level of intellectual honesty. And I would say also someone who has some age and some experience. Because the more age and the more experience, age is very, very valuable when it comes to wisdom. Simply age. Because what a person knows with age, someone with youth and wisdom can never know. Because experience is invaluable. So when we have mentors who are, have experience in life, and you can tell from the way they communicate that they understand people, they understand situations, they have insight. But their insight is also driven by Torah understanding. So they have clarity too. That is something that's unbelievably beneficial to us in helping us raise up our heads. So I bless all of us to have more clarity in a very confusing world. That clarity should not be driven by any biases. I will give you, I'm going to give you some examples. Many religious Jews now with coronavirus, right, and getting somewhat past it, social distancing and this and that and the other thing, right, whatever it is, we can be very dismissive of many things. And if a person determines that the Jewish law says that one has to respect social distancing, that is what God wants from us, then anyone that dismisses that is being dishonest, with intellectually dishonest and faithfully dishonest. These are the types of things I'm talking about. I may personally, right, not that I do, but I'm saying someone may personally say, listen, I don't get this whole social distancing thing. That's fine. You don't need to get it. But are you submitting yourself to it or not? Because you know that the Torah says that you should, right? Or do I say, listen, under the cover, no one's looking, we'll do it, it's okay. This is where we see, I'm just trying to give examples of where we see intellectual honesty or faithful honesty. And this has to pervade in everything that we do. And we have to have mentors who demonstrate this. And then we raise up our heads. We don't get caught up in the chaos that's floating all around us. And we can have a clarity, and we can also have the strength to take a position. I'll leave it at that. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Rosie's got to get on for a challah bake, so I'm going to have to shut down our meeting. My apologies, but thank you for joining. And 6:30 tomorrow night before Shabbos, we will have our meet, even though we are having services, but we will have our meet at 6:30. So please join us. Thank you.
Well done, Rabbi.
Bye, Rabbi.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone's very welcome.
Thank you.